This year marks 50 years since 18-year-olds gained the right to vote in all U.S. elections. But wait, let's back it up and explain. Voting in the United States has always been complicated. When the U.S. Constitution was first ratified in 1788, only white, Christian, landowning males over 21 were allowed to vote. After abolishing the religion and property requirement by 1830, the right to vote was still only given to white males over 21. After the Civil War, black males were guaranteed citizenship and the right to vote in 1870. Well, guaranteed might not be the right word given that many states quickly created barriers for black men to vote. Then, it was time for the ladies. Women gained the right to vote with the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920. In 1965, the Voting Rights Act was passed to ban any kind of discrimination in voting. Still, only people over the age of 21 could vote in U.S. elections. Enter the Vietnam War. The U.S. government drafted thousands of 18 to 21-year-olds during the war, which was highly controversial and sparked a lot of protests among young people. Protesters argued that if they were old enough to fight for this country, then they were old enough to vote for or against politicians that decide whether or not we go to war. So, in 1970, Congress extended the Voting Rights Act of 1965, allowing 18-year-olds to vote in local, state, and federal elections. Then, President Nixon signed this bill into law, though he questioned its constitutionality. The U.S. Supreme Court case of Oregon v. Mitchell decided that Congress could only determine the voting age for federal elections, not state or local elections. But after large public dissatisfaction, Congress passed and ratified the 26th Amendment to the Constitution in 1971, finally giving all Americans 18 and older the right to vote in all U.S. elections. Well, that's great news, right? Well, historically, young people have had the lowest voter turnout rate of any other age demographic in the country. But why is that?
I think a lot of times, when you're 18, you still don't really feel like a real adult. And I feel like a lot of times we treat voting as that's for the real adults. I still have to ask permission to go to the bathroom. It's probably not really clicking in my brain that I can vote for the president of the United States of America.
Most of us really do care about who controls the political power in this country, but there are a lot of hurdles just to cast our first ballot. You need to figure out how to register to vote. And in many states, if you don't register by a certain date, you're out of luck. Then you need to figure out where you could vote. In some areas, if you don't have the transportation or you have work, those are real barriers. And it can be complicated. For example, college students living away from home have to take the extra step of applying for and filling out absentee ballots.
As a first-year college student who is going to school in Arizona but voting in the Virginia general election, I voted through mail this year. But for a lot of my peers and friends, I know that they're struggling and that they have not received their ballot yet and are nervous about voting for the first time through mail, and they really want to make sure their ballot counts.
Strict voter ID laws can be tough for young people. States like Arizona, Iowa, Texas, and others don't accept student IDs as an acceptable form of identification when casting your ballot. But voter turnout in the 2020 election has us feeling hopeful. According to Circle, a youth voting and civics research organization, over 50% of young people voted last year. That's a pretty big shift from previous years. The recent uptick in civic engagement only goes to show that young people want to be involved in the political process.
I don't want to vote just because somebody told me to or because it's encouraged. I want to vote because I know it'll make a change and that I really understand what choices I'm making.
So, will young people continue to vote at lower numbers? Or will we have a strong hand in deciding who leads America into the future? It's up to us.